If you've ever tried to play a solo over a chord progression, you learn pretty quick that every chord presents an opportunity for hitting bad notes. But there is an artful way to make wrong notes sound right. A wrong note or a note that doesn't fit a chord creates tension. If you release that into a note that fits the chord, it kind of makes you go, okay, that's better. And we call that tension and release. For an example, if I'm playing an F chord and I play this note, that doesn't fit. But if I weave that into my solo so that it creates a little tension that moves me to a note that does fit, it sounds completely different. The note sounds right. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use tension notes that are already in the major scale. A real simple rule that you can use to find those tension notes, and then artful ways of creating the tension and releasing it. Now, here's a simple rule you can follow to direct you to the strongest tension notes that you'll find in any scale played over any of the chords in that key.
You ready for this?
If you're playing a solo and you sustain a note that's 1 fret higher than any note in a chord, you create lots of tension. In KeyWeaver, the chord notes are shown in color, while the other scale notes are semi-transparent. And that's so you can easily see the scale notes that are surrounding the chord notes all over the fretboard. So starting with the first chord in the scale, C major, if I play any of the non-chord notes and move to any of the chord notes, that movement feels complete, or in musical terms, it resolves from a non-chord note to a chord note. Now notice when I play the F note, one of the non-chord notes, it's 1 fret above the E note, which is a chord note. So the 4th note of the scale is the strongest tension note played over the C chord. None of the other chord notes have a scale note that's just 1 fret higher. Let's move on to the 2 chord, the D minor. Now notice there are no non-chord notes that are only 1 fret above any chord note. So you can sustain any non-chord scale note over the 2 minor chord without creating a lot of tension. So that 2 minor chord gives you almost as much freedom as a pentatonic scale. You can play all the notes of the major scale without worrying about hitting a clam. Now on to the 3 chord. The E minor. Now notice that there are 2 non-chord scale notes 1 fret above 2 of the chord notes. Both of those can be used to create strong tension in your solos. Now, on to the 4 chord, the F major. Just like with the D minor, there really are no strong tension notes because none of the non-chord notes is only a fret above a chord note. Much like the 2 minor chord, you can just play all the notes of the major scale and not worry about hitting a clam. On to the 5 chord, the G major. The only non-chord note that's 1 fret above a chord note is the C note. So that's your strong tension note for G major. Now to the sixth chord, the A minor. And here, just like the C chord, the F note is the only note that's one fret above a chord note. I'm not going to cover the diminished chord in this lesson, but I do have an entire playlist called Diminished Magic that you should check out if you're interested in digging deeper into the diminished chord and the diminished scale and all that kind of stuff. Right now, let me show you how to put all this tension and release stuff into practice. Now, I have Jam Track Zone open at Guitar Creative with this acoustic finger picking track pulled up. All of the chords in this track, A minor, F, C, and G, are in the key of C major. And remember that the F note is the one strong tension note for both the A minor and the C chords, and the C note is the strong tension note for the G chord. So here are some effective ways to practice this. Now, let's first look at the A minor chord. I'm going to set the loop start and end to the first two bars and start the track. First, play the F note here to get the sound of it in your ear. Then resolve it back to the E. Now, holding down the E note with your third finger here and your first finger back on the D note back here. Bend the string until you hear the note change up to the F note and then release the bend to go back to the E note. Practice doing this move from the E to the F using a bend. Now try pre-bending the note and quickly releasing it, followed by a pull-off to the D, and then maybe a hammer-on back up to the E, like this. That gives you a tension release, followed by another non-chord note, the D, resolving back up to a chord note, the E. Now play around with different beats or playing the whole sequence a little slower or a little faster. You can also go from the D to any other chord note, like the C or the A. Now here's a little bonus tip. Do the same bend and release steps from the B to the C down to the A and on to other chord notes like this. Remember, the one strong tension note when you play the C major scale over the C major chord is F. And that's the same tension note we found playing the C major scale over the A minor chord. That means all of those little tricks and turns we used over the A minor chord can be used over the C chord with only one difference. The A minor has an A note and the C major chord has a G note. So you can still resolve the little turns and stuff to the C or the E note, but where you may have been resolving to the A note over A minor, just resolve to a G note over the C major chord. When you play the C major scale over a G chord, the C note is your strong tension note. Just like the F note is the strong tension note over a C chord. So any phrase you played over the C chord using F, E, and D, you can now shift and play over the G chord using C, B, and A. You just resolve to one of the G chord notes, like this. Let me show you why this works, just a little bonus insight. The major scale is built from two identical four-note patterns. You start on C, you go two whole steps and a half step, and you land on F. Well, if you start on the next note, G, and do the same thing, you land on C. The A, B, and C notes have the same relationship to the G chord as the D, E, and F notes have to the C chord. Both chords are major, and in each case, the fourth note lands one fret above the second chord note. You probably noticed a bit ago that I changed my guitar sound to more of a distorted sound and played the samples a little different, these little riffs that we've come up with. I added a little more vibrato and went up the fretboard to get some of the notes instead of staying down here, for an example, in this riff. I went up and got the E note up here. This note right here, I found it up there. Gives it a little more of a rock sound. and it's the same suspended note going down to the release and then up to a chord tone. It's all about adding tension and release that's appropriate to the style of music you're playing. So for an example, if you're playing jazz, it's like a never-ending tension and release dance. I mean, if you're playing a solo, most of your tension notes are not even in the scale. Like if I were to play a D minor, going to a G, going to a C in more of a jazz style, I might play. Now, I was finished with the content of this video explaining tension and release, and then I thought, wait a minute, I haven't even addressed the idea that sometimes you don't even want to release the tension. You want to just keep it there, depending on the style, again. So if I'm playing in kind of a folk style, I've got a capo on the 3rd fret here, and if I'm playing this G form and this C form, and then here's the 5 chord, which would be like D, I'll sometimes just slide my hand up from C to this D and play that note that's a half step above. So here's that would be like a D chord, but normally you'd have to finger it like that. But just for ease of fingering, and sometimes it's just a desirable sound to hear the whole thing like this. I hear the 3rd of the chord and the 4, which is the capoed 3rd string there, ringing together, and you'll hear it played in chord progressions kind of like. So it is very much a style thing. Now, these tension and release principles work for any chord progression in any key, and there are tons of songs out there that use all the chord progressions all in just one key. The sky's the limit on what you can practice soloing over out there. As you put these principles into practice, take your time and listen to how each one of the scale notes sounds, the character that it has over each one of the chords in that progression. And then maybe move up the fretboard and practice these same kinds of things, moving in and out of chord notes in a new position on the fretboard. If you'll do this and kind of stick with this process, you're going to start learning how to use scales to create awesome solos. Hey, I hope this has helped.